What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Redriveraviation. Hope you're having a fantastic day today. And today we have a really cool airline collectible item video for you all. I really hope each and every one of you are excited for today's video. And without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started, everybody. So we're going to be seeing more types of videos like this going forward as I continue to attend these airline collectible shows around the United States. There's so many cool airline collectible items that I really think are worth highlighting here. So this is going to be the first one of these collectibles that we're going to take a look at. And right here, this is actually an aircraft manual. This was for TWA on a Lockheed L1011. So this is really cool. I got this from the 2023 Fall Collectible Show, Airline Collectible Show that is in Chicago. And it was actually Chris Slimmer that bought this off an individual, and I asked him if he was interested in selling it because I don't have an aircraft manual for any airliner. So I thought this would be really cool to have. Of course, being a private pilot and instrument rated as well, I do have some familiarity with the kind of contents that can be found in these. But of course, for actual jet airliners, it's much different compared to a general aviation prop aircraft. So really excited to take a look. We're obviously we'll get pretty far into it. You know, we won't read it word for word, of course, but we're going to take a look at the highlights, the contents, the chapters, and what you need to know about aircraft manuals for jet airliners. So got this for $25. Thought that was a pretty fair price considering that it does have some really cool markings in it and whatnot. And overall, again, these are pretty tough to come by. So overall, really excited to have this. So I'm going to put the camera on 0.5 so you can kind of just see how big it actually is. So as you can tell, it's a pretty relatively large size. It's about what you would find for a folder. Here's a relatively big book that will be in the next video. This is an Atlanta book, and you can kind of put that size in comparison there to see how big it is. So ultimately, it's a pretty solid offering, so it should look really cool. So now we're back in our typical format. Let's go ahead and open it. So here's the front cover. Trans World Airlines, you got the TWA globes here, so definitely with the globes theme with it, so that's really cool. So in here you can see it has a little divider piece right there, and then we get started right here with the major changes at the time. This is what's going to be in the front. You can see the date, it's May 30th 1974. I'll make sure it's focusing on the words. Hopefully it's not focusing on my hands. So overall, really cool that this is where it starts, obviously, with the various changes. So that's what you're going to find here with this particular offering. So unfortunately, that page kind of got goofed up a little bit, so I'll it's stapled on, that's why. So then you can see we get into the contents. Obviously, you can kind of get after it yourself a little bit if you're interested with the particular details, but you have all the critical phases of flight that you'd expect here with their various pages designated. So overall, it's really cool. So it also has these really cool tabs on it. So this is the index where that starts. Really cool logs throughout, and it does have quite a bit of writing in it. So you can see here with some date changes. So we have October of 72, February of 73, and so on. And then the last one here, as you can see, was June of 1974. So that's really cool there in pen and pencil as well. Obviously a little bit worn, so we have some pages that are falling off a little bit, but then we get into some of the actual preface material here, so you can kind of see the table of contents and what's designated. So of course that's all going to be in here with the various logos and whatnot, so that's quite cool. I will try to get these fixed at some point, but unfortunately it looks like some of the paper ripped a little bit there. And then of course we get into all the chapters and all of the words, so it's quite nice to see right there. Also, let me throw it over here because eventually it's going to go over the 2 pages, and I definitely want to represent that when it does. Okay, so here's the Flight Operations Training Bulletin. These are very important for these various aircraft. And I thought it was kind of funny that it said 727, which was another one that he had, but the L1011 was the one I got here. So you can see the areas of navigation. This really gets into details. It's a really cool stapled document, so you can see all the various, it goes into detail about RNAV routes and all of those procedures, which is quite cool. It even has cool signatures on it. Sorry, that's kind of shading off a little bit right there. It's just the book shadows, so but you can see what we're doing here. So then we get into some more bulletins, of course. You know how these work, so kind of flipping through, you can pause to read, and the shaded side is readable. In fact, I might be able to kind of turn this a little bit to get a little bit better there. So let me kind of give you a little bit of a better angle there. You can kind of see both pages a little bit better. And then we get into the real details here. So again, next index, and then we have all of our various chapters for procedures and whatnot. So that looks really great. So here's one, it goes into all the details on the handbook, which is quite cool. So you can see we have weight limitations and whatnot on here, flaps retracted, and then all the kinds of airplane operations, which is really cool. And then we go into quite a healthy amount of detail regarding various components here. And of course, you can kind of glance over yourself. I'll just kind of note what I think looks pretty cool. All the tables are really cool. There's the tank paragraph. Then, of course, we get into our various operating limitation charts. So you can see here, this one appears to be an environmental one. So that's really cool. Takeoff landing limit. Over here, more really cool graphs. This is pretty typical. With my Piper Tomahawk training, we had graphs relatively similar to this, and then for instrument in the Cirrus, a little bit updated, but still the same concept, of course. So you can see the graphs where it's all designated. Appreciate those engineers very much and all the other people that make those happen. Those graphs, those are pretty complicated. So then we get into some more information here. Some of the papers, different colors, which is quite cool. So you can see about the thrust takeoff rate. That's pretty cool. So there's a bunch of really good information to read in here, of course. But of course, I'm trying to keep my hand back a little bit. So if you do want to read any particular parts of it, you are more than welcome to. And again, we have some really cool graphs. I'll bring the book up just a little bit so you can see a little bit more of what we're talking about. Really cool graph right here designating various components. It's quite nice. This graph over here also looks really cool with the oxygen mask. And we have some normal checklist, some warnings. Here's a really cool normal checklist. This is a really cool one to take a look at. So of course you got all the various components there. So that's quite nice. And then you got the back, which has the landing and all that. So that's really cool. Exterior walk around. So, you know, we get into the real details here. And again, pause to read. I'll kind of just slowly go through every page. So if you do want to see information, and if you want any pictures of books, just email me with the link below, or send me a DM on Instagram or equivalent, and I'll send you a picture of whatever page you want. So just let me know if it's unreadable in any way, and I'm happy to send it to you. So you can see the various hydraulics that they're talking about here in the flight handbook. Normal starting procedure, quite cool. Really cool. We start getting into some writing here, so you can see some underlines. The first officer shall call out V1 in V rotate, which is quite nice. And then it even has an equation here for normal takeoff, which is really cool. This page has more highlights, so you can see some various components about rejected takeoffs. So somebody was most likely studying in this, and obviously during this time, no iPads, none of that. So the best way to do it was to highlight. So good job by that person. And I'm not sure how he got this to an airline collectible show. Of course, it wasn't him selling it, but how it got to an airline collectible show. Then we get into some really cool graphs for takeoff and landing maneuvers, so those are quite cool. This is quite a cool page right here for various entries, including teardrop, parallel, and direct. So some components of aviation do never change, so it's really cool. I think this landing graph over here is quite nice, so that's really cool to see. More cool components. You got the ADF over there and even the ASR, which is quite impressive. Here's some more really cool graphs on here with various components. Really going into a bunch of detail over here with this autopilot flight director information. That's really cool. And then you can see some more max gross weights and whatnot. Here's some various terminology here, so that's quite cool. So yeah, TWA certainly went into a bunch of detail among the other airlines, but of course it's just one that you found at the collectible show. So that's why we're taking a look at this one. More really cool components throughout here. And we got some loss of generators and whatnot, so that's quite cool. APU fire, it's really sweet. Air conditioning, smoke, all that you would expect for the emergency side of it. So that all looks really good. Restore breathing, and then that takes us into the abnormal operating procedures. So a little bit less, which is quite cool, but still very important information throughout here. Trying to get every page. Just, you know, no flap landing, ILS-2 engines, obviously since the L1011 had 3. Goes through the various parts of this. So pretty simple there. Then we get into the air conditioning, which has its own place, which is obviously very important for a jet aircraft. So that's why we're taking a look at that now. And it has various graphs and various cabin temp controls that would be found in the cockpit. So that's really cool. So taking a look at all of those. This is a really cool graph right here. You can really get a good observation of what the air conditioning is controlled to in the airplane, which is super important. This page also does a really good job illustrating that. Same song, second verse. The guy actually did some really good writing in here. Probably was tested over at some point, so that's quite cool. Then we get in the aircraft general. This has some very quality information here, so you can see the various topics that we're talking about, more highlights, all what we would expect at this point. Yeah, really cool. Mainly just graphs, which is quite understandable in this connotation at this time frame. So get into some engine start procedures here, number 8 in the windows. So legible handwriting, which is quite nice from this individual. And then we get into some warning charts, which is quite cool. And more cool detail before we get into 7, which is the automated flight, which at this time was quite interesting. So, oops, get that little first page there so you can see that. And then that takes us into some more various pages, which are not double-sided, which is quite interesting. And then cool with the highlights, some blue pin on this particular day. So it's quite nice. Make sure it's just get them all in there. More highlights. He really liked the highlighter for this book, which is quite impressive and quite important, I should say. ACFS modes, you know, different components like that. VOR procedures. So this is showing various types of approaches. And feel free to screenshot and then turn your phone sideways if you want to see all that detail, or just let me know if you want better pictures of it, especially like graphs like that will need better pictures. But of course, the intention here is to get a nice highlight of this book, which I think has some really good information in it. So again, mic selection, quite cool. And then we have some more various components here. This cabin galley, and he even marked out with highlighters and paragraphs. So overall, really cool. 9 takes us into the electrical power, which is one of the most important components of any airplane, especially a 3-engine jet. So you can see where he was highlighting, and I think some of these pages were even added in a little bit. So overall, really good information here. Some APU, AC, DC monitors, yeah, very complex information and nowhere near comprehending that, but it is really cool to assess. Pages like this are really cool. These are actually like more laminated types of paper, which is really nice. I don't know if laminated is the right word, but you know, depth papers. So overall, really good. So all that looks really nice. And that takes us into some more information about the battery before we go into number 10, which is the emergency equipment, which is of course very important. Has some evacuation information, the door controls, all this very important. So glad to see all this information listed, and various positions for people and how to get them out, and the passenger oxygen system. So that's quite awesome. Then we get into some more information back here real quick. Oh shoot, sorry about the tripod. So really good notes in here too. He loved this highlighter. Really good job explaining the fire extinguisher over here. He certainly went into some really good detail on that. Then we go into more additional information here about flight controls, which is very important. This is some complex information, guys. I'm just kind of letting everybody soak it in a little bit. There's some really good content here. So you can see this is a really cool graph. This shows obviously the components of the plane, so that's really cool to see. And even more of that. Overall, looks really good. Fantastic work. That takes us into flight instruments, which is one of the coolest chapters. So you can see the various graphs for the match, and then of course, what else are we gonna have? The clock and various other instruments. There's the altimeter, so glad to see all that. And then we go into some fuel. That takes us into some more really cool graphs like this that look quite nice. And some paragraphs, which we'd never have time to read on this channel, so no. But you are more welcome to pause if you want to. More various components here. This is a really cool graph, the hydraulics, which seem like all that planes are, but here's some really detailed graphs. Engine-driven pumps, and then that takes us into hydraulic power, which what more would we like to see than that? So we go into mainly anti-ice, the start, then more various icing control. That then takes us into the landing gear, which is quite nice. Manual brakes below 20 knots, pretty cool. So again, really cool graphs to show that off. Here's some really cool information through here with a nice variety of writing, then graphs. That then takes us into navigation, which also has some great information. So the fast point, really good with the ADF here. That's really nice. Airplanes have changed significantly since this was established, but hey, we got graphs and so much to take a look at. I don't even know how to pronounce that word for 19, but that's what's in here. Pneumatics, I don't know, but pretty cool with all the information. Some really cool graphs with the engines. Bleed air control, yes. Yeah, it all looks legible on the phone, so hopefully you all can see this. Plant power plant rather, excuse me. So you got some really good information on here. Very cool. Oh, looks really good. And then that takes us into our last section, which is quite lengthy, planning and performance. So of course, It has all the data that one could want for these applicable plans, which is really cool to see all this. And I think it's just mainly text about it here. Here, moving through to see if there's any differences. Of course, very important to establish all this, of course, but where's the pictures? We like pictures books around here, of course. Oh, this is really cool. So this is a variety of airport and routings, which is really cool. So for example, Washington Dulles L Las Vegas, here's the route that it takes, which is really cool. So IAD, CSS, J149, J134, BOM, J110, PGS, STAR, LAS. That's really cool. So those are all really cool. So we got a variety. They got Dulles, Vegas. So pretty much every major airport there as examples. That's really cool. So that's awesome. One of the cooler pages I've found. There's a cool planning page. There's some more route pages, how to do all that. And I think we're gonna get into some charts, takeoff, more takeoff, go around chart. And yeah, that all looks really good. Some various changes, some thrust changes, thrust reductions, kidding. Cruise thrust, kind of getting tough to get around the corner here, but we're almost all the way through anyway. Holding, keep in mind, very limited technology at this point. So all of this needs to be documented. There's some really cool engraved Sharpie, it looks like. More highlights, more filled out charts. Revision 26, some more cool crosswind charts and whatnot. I'm assuming that's what that is. Airport landing gross, weight. And that takes us to the very back where the manual ends. So overall, really cool, effective February 1st, 1973. I thought this was quite a cool book, so I'm very glad that I got it. I did not realize there was so much